Welcome to the fan favorite edition of Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas. In this episode, we'll go back to February of 2022 when Chancellor Hance sat down with the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Texas, Dan Patrick. Before we get to that, we encourage you to subscribe to this podcast and tap the notifications button. That way, you'll be notified every time we release an episode. Check out our website, hancepodcast.com, and send us an email, info@hancepodcast.com.
This is Kent Hance, best storyteller in Texas, and we're honored to have the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Texas, Dan Patrick, a good friend of mine, and a guy that everybody's listening is going to know him, but they're not going to know him. But when you get through today, you're going to really know him. And one of his favorite sayings, and one of mine that I like that he says, I didn't come this far just to come this far. Yeah. And that's great. But the governor, and for people that don't know, the lieutenant governor, you always call him governor.
Yes.
And Governor Patrick, we appreciate you
I've been
being
called
here.
worse.
Well, I've been in politics. I understand that.
I know.
I want you to tell us, you were born in Baltimore, about your childhood, about your parents, and take us up through high school.
So I grew up in one of these 12-foot wide brick homes that were built at the turn of the last century. 416 South Oldham Street. Has a good ring to it. You're at 606 Southwest 5th Street in Dimmitt, Texas.
That's right.
And these are the houses that you would see in the movie Rocky. Even though that was Philadelphia, the houses are the same in those two cities. You know, that neighborhood that Rocky's walking, the little marble steps, little houses. My dad, very typical of that generation. He dropped out of high school and joined the Marines, fought in the South Pacific. My mom dropped out of high school as a senior and went to work at Martin Marietta airplane factory in Baltimore. And when they came out of the war, my dad went to work in a steel mill, and then he went to work as a truck driver and rose up through the ranks as head of the transportation department for the Baltimore Sun paper, in charge of all the delivery, and never finished high school. But he was the best leader I've ever been around, firm but fair. And my mom was a bookkeeper for the rest of her life, very successful. And you know, a lot of people in your parents' and my parents' generation, we're similar in age, Chancellor. They didn't need more than a one-room schoolhouse to be great Americans. They didn't need. It would have been nice. And a lot of people on the GI Bill, great, went to college, but we built a country on the backs of people that survived the Depression and went into World War II, and really didn't have as much education as required today to succeed. But it doesn't mean they weren't as smart or smarter than some people are getting out of Yale today. And so I had great parents, and we spent the first 12 years of my life in the inner city of Baltimore. We played. You've heard me tell this story. You know, when we played baseball. I'm not kidding. We played it in the middle of the street, and the manhole covers were home plate and second base, and a 57 Chevy was first, and whatever car was on the left was third base. And when a car came, we'd have to stop for a minute, let the car go by. And we moved out to the suburbs when I was a teenager, and my little league team, we actually had a grass field, and we had a dugout, and I thought I'd
gone to heaven.
Going to baseball heaven.
Yeah. Tell me a little about high school. Did you play baseball in high school? Did you participate in any other activities?
So I was a pretty good athlete, but not a great athlete. So I played a lot of sports, but I broke my leg in the 9th grade, and then I broke my leg playing basketball again in the 10th grade, same leg twice. And so that pretty much put an end to sports. I mean, I played baseball and basketball, you know, as an adult, and softball and those things. But I mean, that ended high school sports. So I ran for office. And I ran for vice president of the junior class and won. And then I ran for president of the senior class. Now, this is 1968, and Motown was big. And I'm a musician. I've been playing the guitar for 50 years. Still have the same guitar that my parents bought me for $500, which they couldn't afford in 1964. I still have it. And I play, and I had a couple of bands. I had a big 18-piece band. I had a Beatles band. I had, you name it, Motown band. I had 4 black singers. You know, 1968, Martin Luther King, the year of the riots. You know, we still had neighbors in our neighborhood that came to my parents and said, "Why do you have these black boys down in your house every day?" My mother said, "Because they're my friends and my son, and they're in the band." because we had a basement. So that's where all the band equipment was and the singers. And we had a really good band. Cut one record, didn't go very far. But so I'm running for class president against this very attractive young girl. And I still remember her name, Becky. You remember your opponents, right? Always.
Absolutely.
And so I said, if you elect me, I will have the Temptations for the senior prom. Now, I had no idea how to get the Temptations for the senior prom or the Four Tops.
That's big time.
Big time.
Temptations.
So I get elected. I'm trying to figure this out. And there was a place called the Blue Velvet Nightclub. And I happened to see in the month of May, graduation month, the Temptations were coming to the Blue Velvet. So I called and I reserved the entire club for the second show. And upstairs we had our own band, and all the kids went upstairs, and we came down for of course we couldn't drink, but they were happy to sell it out. And I knew that the tickets would be a little out of price for some of the kids. So my dad, every day when he drove into Baltimore, I said, Dad, I want you to stop by the wholesale candy store. And I want you to pack up on candy. And I and my other officers, we would sell candy in the morning when the buses came in. Kids had to wait in the cafeteria till the bell rang, and in the afternoon waiting for the bus. So we raised a lot of money selling candy bars, and that helped offset the price of the tickets. And so I kind of joked when I ran for office in 2006 for the state senate, and then for lieutenant governor. I've never lost an election. It started in 1968. I didn't run again until I was 55 years old later for the Texas Senate. So that was high school.
But
it was
you
fun.
had an interest in politics. What spurred that interest in politics?
So what I wanted to do was be a television sportscaster. And there is another Dan Patrick.
Right.
Dan's 10 years younger than I am. But I wanted to be in television. So I worked my way through school. I went to the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC. I think we had 1,000 students, and I think there's 20,000 or so today. It's a big school.
Big school and a good school. In fact, Texas Tech beat them in the national championship for the chess tournament.
Yes, they did.
NCAA.
And UMBC beat Virginia as the first and only 16th seed to beat a team in the NCAA basketball
That's
tournament.
exactly
and everybody
right.
said, "Who's UMBC?" I said, "Well, that's my alma mater." So I worked my way through through college. I worked as a disc jockey, doing the all-night show and going to school in the day. Or
What got you to be a disc jockey? How'd you come?
I
up
still
with that?
have the project. We all remember you take a class trip somewhere, and we took a class trip in social studies in the 9th grade, and we went to a radio station. Somehow or another, I thought maybe the band was really there playing the music. I mean, I never really focused on. I knew it was
What
a
was
Buddy
that?
Holly record or a Beatles record, but I never really knew how it worked. I was a 14, 15-year-old kid, and I went there and I said, "Wow." And then we went to a TV station, and it was a double wow. This looks like fun. But part of that story, Kent, is when my dad worked at the Sun paper, so he wanted me to start working. So I had this paper corner in front of St. Ignatius Catholic Church, I think is the name, in downtown Baltimore in the 60s. And I'd get dropped off at 5 in the morning or 5:30. It used to be cold. And I would work every Mass till noon. And in those days, downtown churches had big congregations and big attendance. So there was a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I had the Philadelphia Inquirer, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, and the Baltimore Sun, and whatever else. And I had these big stack of papers. And when it was cold, I'd go in the vestibule and get a little warm. My grandfather would come up sometimes in the car and run the heater, and he'd sit there and read all the papers, and he'd bring me some hot chocolate. But when Kennedy was assassinated, of course, the church was packed, particularly of Catholics, but all Americans. And while they were in church, Lee Harvey Oswald was killed. So it happened, and I guess somebody told me, I don't know how I heard it, but all those people who were in this big church didn't know. So when they came out, I told them the news.
Wow.
And so that was my first, before that, or about that time in high school. And I thought that was interesting.
Had an impact on you, telling people news that was shocking news that they had not heard.
Yeah.
And they didn't expect to hear.
Yeah.
After having the shocking news on Friday.
Yeah. And so anyway, I decided when I had that 9th grade project, I saw that little folder somewhere in the attic. I wanted to be a disc jockey or in television. And so I worked my way through school as a country western disc jockey. It was so much fun. I got to do the shows with all the country greats. I mean, you name them, I did a show.
They came through the town.
They came through town. And And I did that for a couple of years at 2 different radio stations.
So you were in college at the time.
I was in college at the time.
And you were working country and western music?
Country western music, right. Before country was cool. But it was, it was, I got to do shows.
Who are some of the people you met? Do you remember?
Ernest Tubb.
Ernest Tubb. But
Wanda Jackson.
Wanda. She'd sing Let's Have a Party.
Hank Williams Jr. I had the task. He played at the Baltimore Civic Center somewhere, that would have been the late 60s, early 70s. He was still young. And they had a curfew at midnight. The show, it was the Kitty Wells show. Kitty Wells and all of her big show, and then Hank Williams Jr. was, and that's when he was still wearing wagon wheels on his jacket, before he became the Hank everybody knows. And midnight, the police said, "Got to shut this thing down. You got to go out there." And I had to walk out on the stage and tell Hank Williams Jr. got to shut it down. I was a 20-some-year-old kid, but they were Freddie Hart. All these.
Freddie Hart sang "The Keys in the Mailbox." Yeah. Come on in.
There you go.
I won't even ask you where you've been.
Yeah,
he missed her a lot.
Yeah. He had another. Was it Easy Lovin'? Did he do Easy Lovin'?
Easy Lovin',
maybe Freddie Hart or Charlie Rich, and B.J. Thomas. He was doing Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head then, and he wasn't really a country guy. But I got a chance to work with all of them, and it was fun. It was really a lot of fun, and they were interesting people.
Any of them stand out as
Bill Anderson,
Whispering
Bill. Still. When it broke my heart. Still. The guy could never sing a lick, but he could whisper.
Yeah. He was good at that.
They were all interesting. All interesting.
All of them pretty friendly to you?
Oh, they were all very friendly. Ray Price, I love Ray Price with the Cherokee Cowboys. I grew up on country
City
music. City Lights. And so it was all a good time. But so then I tried to get a TV job. And so I auditioned at the local ABC station. And my voice was pretty high. I don't have a real deep voice now, but it was higher then. And I probably looked like I was 15 instead of 22 or whatever. And so I couldn't really get it on air. So I applied for a booth announcer's job. And so they had me, I'll never forget it, they had me read the copy. It's 11 o'clock, because in the East, the news is at 11. It's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? I must have read that thing. It's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? It's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? It's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? I didn't get the job. But so I went into sales. And
but you went in sales at the TV station or?
I was selling radio time at the radio station at this show. That's where I learned to sell, and that will come back around later when I bought and owned radio stations in Houston, Texas, and put Rush Limbaugh on the air when no one else would, many years later. But so I went into sales, and I went to work for the Papermate company selling Papermate El Marco markers and Flair pens, and so I did very well. But I never gave up on going to television. So then I moved over to a company called Herff Jones, because if you're going to sell, I wanted a commission job. I didn't want to, when I got out of college in '72, my salary was $8,800 a year, and there was a guy making $10,000 a year, and I thought, man, if I could make $10,000 a year, I'm rich. But I had a company car and those things, so I went on a full commission job selling for Herff Jones. There's Jostin Balfour and Herff Jones, 3 ring companies, pretty much have America, college and high school rings, and so I was down, my territory was Georgia, Florida, Alabama, and Tennessee.
Now, this was after you were out of college?
Out of college. Interesting times. Very interesting times.
And you were selling rings?
Selling school rings and caps and gowns. Yep. In the South. And pretty interesting time. And I just got married. We wanted to kind of go back east. And so the company, my wife was from Baltimore as well, Washington, D.C. area. So we got a job. They moved me back to Scranton because we printed the yearbooks there. So I had Pennsylvania, D.C., Delaware, Maryland as my territory, and there was a little TV station at the airport in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, and I drive by that thing, and I was 27. It was kind of like moving on in my career, and one day I stopped by, true story, and I walked in this little TV station, WNEP, and I said, I'm just wondering if there are any part-time jobs on the weekend. I'd like to get into television. And the station was so small, the general manager's office was off the little hallway there. And I heard a voice say, "Who's out there?" And the receptionist, whoever it was, said, "Well, there's someone here looking. Send him in." So I go in there, and his name is Eldon Hale. And so Eldon...
H-A-L-E?
H-A-L-E. So Eldon says, so what experience do you have? I said, well, I was a disc jockey in Baltimore. He said, I used to be a disc jockey in Baltimore. He said, different time. And he said, I just fired a guy this morning. So we had a budget cut back. We used to have a weekend guy. You did weather and sports on the weekend, and you were a 3-day-a-week reporter. He said, we're just looking for a part-time guy to do sports and weather on the weekends. Are you interested? I said, yes, sir. And so he said, well, go back there. And they set up an audition right on the spot. I went back there, and he said, I'll get back to you. And a few days later, I got a call. He said, we're going to hire you. That was in June of, I think, 77. I get the years mixed up sometimes. And I did weather and sports on the weekends.
On TV?
On TV. And
did they have an affiliation?
ABC, and we were the number one station in the market. We had a 50 share. A lot of these smaller markets.
What town?
Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, 41st market. So not a bad market. And, of course, I'd cover the Yankees and the Phillies because that was our teams we cover. And I did the weather outside. And in Scranton, you can get some pretty bad weather in the winter. One time I told this guy, it had a little roof over our head outside, and I said, I want you to climb up on top of the roof. It was Halloween. I said, I'm going to throw a pumpkin up in the air, and you better catch it, because I'm going to say the air is so thick tonight it could hold a pumpkin. And I threw a pumpkin up in the air, and he caught it, and that was good. So we had a lot of fun, and we did a lot of crazy things. And so they liked what I was doing, so they gave me the full-time job. And so I switched from sports and weather to just sports. And again, before the other Dan Patrick, he hadn't come along yet. And I was there only 6 months. And you can languish in a small market your whole career. And a guy was skiing in the Poconos, which is where Wilkes-Barre, Scranton is, and he saw my show, and he contacted me. He said, we have an opening in Washington, D.C. We'd like for you to come down. So I came down.
He happened to be up there on vacation or something.
He was skiing, and he was looking for a guy. They were getting rid of their guy. And so they were looking for a new weather guy and a new sports guy. And turned out that they hired this weather guy. I don't know whatever happened to Al Roker, but Al Roker was in Syracuse, and I was in Scranton. We started the same day at Channel 5, Washington, D.C. Big station. They have an hour news at 10 o'clock. And in Washington, D.C., a lot of people go to bed early because of the traffic. And so, and I got to meet my boyhood idol, Steve Allen, Steve Areno, Schmock. Anybody old enough remembers all Don Knotts started out on the Steve.
But you and Al Roker started
same day
at Channel 5
yeah.
in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Is that a Fox affiliate now?
I
believe it is.
It might be. It was independent then, but I got to do the afternoon shows. That's how I met Steve Allen and all these people. So that was fun. And then we'd been there about a week, and they go on strike. I'd never been in a union except you had to join a union there. So they go on strike, and they assign Al and I, the new kids on the block, to go part of the negotiating team. How and why I don't know. I guess nobody else wanted to do it. And I'll never forget this. They came up with a deal. Part of the deal was we're going to pay reporters $19,500 a year, and I forget what the anchor salary was. And Al was sitting one seat down from me, and he leaned back in the chair, and he said, it's great. I'm getting a raise. They were paying me $40. So I didn't say anything. And that was a lot of money in 1978, I guess that was it. And so Al, and interestingly enough, fast forward all this time, when I get elected lieutenant governor, someone called Al Roker and said, you used to work with Dan Patrick. Tell us about Dan Patrick. And Al said, he's got a big head. And they said, what do you mean, hard to work with? He said, no, he's got a big head. He said, in television, you have a big head. That's the story of Vanna White, that she got hired by Merv Griffin because she has a big head. People on television, for whatever reason. And so I haven't seen Al or talked to him for years, but that's typical Al. I knew he was going to be very successful because he was so talented and so good, and so I was not surprised. And then Eldon Hale, I told you, the first guy that hired me.
Right.
I'm campaigning for lieutenant governor in 2013 or 14, whatever it was. And I look out, there's Eldon Hale sitting in the audience. He had moved somewhere north of Fort Worth, probably still living up there. And you talk about, he started it all. I'd have never been in television had he not given me that chance, and there he was.
So how long were you at Channel 5 in Washington, D.C.?
So I was in Washington, D.C. for about a year, and Washington's a different market. Every story you were there. Every story, there are no local stories. Like when the farmers blocked all the streets coming into Washington, instead of it being a local story, like the farmers who blocked the streets, that was a federal story. And I covered the Redskins, which was great, and got to meet Jack Pardee, the Aggie, one of the Junction boys, who was instrumental in my life because, I gave a speech you heard recently of all the people who mentor you and guide you. So I'd been in Washington about a year, and I get an offer to go to Houston. But
you met Jack Pardee when he was a coach for
the Redskins, Washington
right.
Redskins.
And that he was originally from Christoval, Texas.
Was he?
And played six-man football.
Yes.
And they said he wasn't real good until his junior and senior year. And Bear Bryant said he just didn't get. It took him a while to get used to all that traffic. With 22
Yeah.
guys out there instead of 12.
Yeah, he was great. And turns out, going back to that church that I used to sell papers in front of for a couple of years, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old, all the NFL teams in those days, all the players wore a blue sport coat, gray slacks with the team emblem on it. And there wasn't much personality allowed in the NFL in those days. And I realized I'd met Jack Pardee at the church. At some point, he'd come to church with some of the players because I used to meet them all when they were in town to play the Baltimore Colts. So I get this offer to go to Houston. I had only been to Texas one time, and that was the first time I came to Texas was to cover the Washington Bullets playing the San Antonio Spurs earlier that year.
How did they spot you? How the Texas people spot you in Washington, D.C.?
I sent out some audition tapes. You're always looking for your next job when you're in television because you never know when you're going to get fired. So you always have audition tapes. And people see you. And Washington was a big market, so people come back. So I'm not really sure how they found me. I don't remember. They found me. And so I go to Jack. And so I'd been to Texas one time, went to the Alamo, another great story here, circle back. I went in there and saved the cenotaph and helped redesign the Alamo now. First thing I did was go to the Alamo, but we played George Gervin and the Iceman and the Spurs, and this would have been 79 and the playoffs. And so I get the offer in October. And I go to Jack Pardee. I said, Jack, I've gotten an offer to go to Houston to be a sportscaster. Because he was such a nice man. And I said, what do you think? He said, if I could ever get back to Texas, that would be heaven. He said, there's nothing greater than the Texas A&M-Texas rivalry. Because, on the East Coast, you go college football is just not the same up there. And he said, I'd take the job if I were you. So another mentor. And what happens? Jack ends up coming to Houston Oiler coach, University of Houston coach. And I work with him again. All these people come back around in your life. It's just amazing sometimes.
You've had a lot of careers that you cross paths with them again.
Yes.
And in different positions.
Drayton McLean. I bought this little radio station. So I worked in TV for 5 years in Houston, and then I decided when my kids were old enough to go to school that I wouldn't see them much because when you're a television anchor, you go in the afternoon, you come home after the 10 o'clock news. Well, as a sports guy, if the Rockets are practicing or the Astros, I'm going in earlier than even the news anchors to cover practice. So you see your kids in the morning for breakfast. And I know because I talked to one of my senior anchors who I worked with who told me that was his biggest regret in the business. So I said, I don't want to grow up only seeing my kids for breakfast. And I love what I'm doing, but I just don't want to do that. And I had gotten to the point also, I was, this would have been in the mid-'80s, I don't want to give ball scores the rest of my life. I don't know what I want to do, but I want to do something a little bit more important. I had fun. I mean, it's kind of legendary in Houston. I painted the whole news set blue one weekend. I painted myself blue on the air. I did when the baseball went on strike. I brought a coffin out on the set and threw all the uniforms and bats and balls in the coffin. I mean, we had a lot of
had to bury it.
We had to bury it. We're done with it. So we had a lot of fun. But so I went into the restaurant business, and
this was in Houston.
In Houston, which was a mistake.
But you were still sports announcer.
No, I left. I left to go into business.
But when you were sports announcer, what station?
That was Channel 11, KHOU, and ownership had changed. I still had a contract, and one day I went CBS, and I said to him, and we were the number one show on Fridays because we had Dallas as a lead-in, so a big audience. And I said to the general manager, I'm under contract, but this new management they don't want all this fun stuff. They just want me to give the score. I said, that's not for me. He said, well, okay, we'll terminate your contract. I learned right there, be careful what you say, because they terminated my contract, so I was out of work. I could have had another year of money
you told in. My dad used to say, don't tell everything you know.
I was right.
And so that way you told him a little more than
I said I can't not be me. I mean, I got to be me. And so I went into the restaurant business, and we were doing fine, sports bars in the early days. And then the world crashed in '86 in Texas. Everyone went broke, including me. And I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. And this little radio station, a guy came in who used to be a stringer in the locker. A stringer is a guy who doesn't work for a radio or TV station part-time. He goes and gets some interviews and sells them. And he came in and said, hey, there's a little radio station in Tomball, Texas, where I would be a senator one day. I'd only been up there once or twice. And
that's North Houston.
North Houston.
North of the 1960 area,
right.
Wasn't it?
Yeah. A long drive up there to cover a high school football game on Friday nights. I made their trip a few times.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I put together some investors. That's a whole podcast how we did that, and bought the station. How
many investors?
There were 3 or 4, but I had to buy out 10 or 12. This is one of your stories, Ken. So a podiatrist in Tomball, Texas, had put the station on the air and got his patients to put the money up. Station was going broke. You can't make any money in Tomball. You had to move it to Houston. They were suing him. He was suing them. And so, excuse me. So I said, look.
That may be my water.
Is that your water?
And this may be your tea. Did you have tea?
Yeah, I did.
Did you drink out of that water?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Okay, well,
I don't have any. Did you drink out of that tea?
I did not.
So that's a true story. Remember, he's a podiatrist. So I said, look. So one of the
he had started the station.
He started the station. So and they'd all seen me on television for years. So somebody contacted me and said, can you help us? And I said, well, I'll try to help you. And I said, look, if I can get him out of the deal and get you out, because you're going to lose everything, and the station's going to go dark. They're going to take the license. The sheriff was knocking on the door, repoing the equipment. I said, he hadn't paid anybody salaries. And I said, let me see if I can help. So I go to see him. I knock on the door, and this scruffy little Peanuts character kid says, my dad's in the back. I go out there. Remember, he's a podiatrist. He's about 300 pounds, and he's sitting in his pool, which is in the shape of a foot. And he's sitting in the big toe. I'm not making that up. I'm not making that up.
Podiatrist sitting in the big toe, and you're going to do business with him.
And I sat down on the side of the pool, and I cut a deal with him. We bought the station. We didn't know what we were going to do with it, and but
was he eager to sell or
no? But he had no choice. I mean, so we made the deal, and I borrowed a little bit of money, and I thought I'd do business talk, sports talk. I was doing sports in the morning, sports talk, because that's what I could do. I knew all the players to get them on. And one day I get a call about 6 months after we buy it from a guy named Lee Vandenhandel. Lee Vandenhandel was the person who was producing the Rush Limbaugh show. And in 1988, no one would put Rush Limbaugh on the air. He was considered a radical, nobody put, you didn't talk about God, you didn't talk about politics and radio in the 1980s. It was ask your doctor, ask your lawyer, what'd you do on your summer vacation, what's your favorite recipe. That's about as controversial as radio got. And the way radio works is, why would they put it on a syndicated show and give up commercials to him when they got a local guy who's paying him to be on the air?
Right.
So no one would put him on. I said, send me a tape. I listened to the tape and said, man, that guy, he's thinking what I'm thinking.
He's got talent, too.
He's got talent. And of course, he had a quixotic career as well. And so we put him on the air. There were 40 stations roughly in Houston in the ratings. We had more cows in North and West Harris County listening to our station before Rush than we had people, and horses, because Harris County's a pretty big county, a lot of rural areas,
right.
Not as much today. In 3 months, we were the number one station between 11 and 2. Went from 40 to number 1 because Rush Limbaugh. I didn't have 10 cents to market it.
And you were you had him from 11 till 2.
11 to 2.
And is live.
Live. And then I bought a second station. And
when did you bought the station and closed on it? When? And then how long until you get Rush Limbaugh?
6 months later.
6 months.
Yeah.
Were you able to break even during those first 6 months, or did you?
No. Well, I wasn't making any money. Nobody's making any money. We were, just barely making it work. But we put Rush Limbaugh on there, and we became profitable probably in the first year.
How many other investors did you have?
I don't remember. I mean, I can't.
But you were the largest.
No. I didn't have any money. Remember, I went broke in the restaurant business. I was a sweat equity guy. I didn't have any money.
Oh, okay.
I had to go get people to help me. And so put Rush on the air, and we become number 1. And then we have an opportunity to buy a second station. And I called Lee Vandenhandel and said, I want to put Rush on in the afternoon. Well, we can't allow that. He's only on live. Nobody does. I said, wait a minute. Not everybody can listen to 11 and 2. And they might hear something they like and they want to hear it again. So they let me do that. So I had Rush on one station, 11 to 2, and then 4 to 7 on the other. So we were
Same program, same
day.
But you had different listeners.
Yeah, different listeners, or the listeners who wanted to hear it again. You had the Rush rooms and all those things. And then, again, I'm like the Forrest Gump. When I look at my life, all these people I've run into, Rush and I become great friends. He used to do those Rush Tour to Excellent tours, and he would go around do those, and we did them in Houston. And then he was a big Pittsburgh Steelers fan. And I can say this, God rest his soul, when he would stay at a hotel, he loved the Pittsburgh Steelers. So he said, he's coming to Pittsburgh. He said, meet me in Pittsburgh. He said, we'll sit in the press box together and watch the game because the Oilers were playing. And I said, okay. He said, catch me at the hotel. I'm under the name of Chuck Knoll, Chuck Knoll, the coach of the Steelers. So he went under the name of Chuck Knoll everywhere in the hotels. And so we went to a lot of games together. And then he came to Houston for the playoff game between Joe Montana when he went to the Kansas City Chiefs and Warren Moon, and that's a whole other great story where we're going to have a private dinner in this restaurant, and it turned out we took the whole restaurant over, and it was just wild. It was just crazy. And he was Rush Limbaugh changed my life. Now God and Jesus Christ changed my life, but in terms of people on this planet walking around, Rush Limbaugh, besides all these other people, because he had
a huge impact.
Had a huge impact because our station became, very popular. And then I built around. I switched from sports to political talk because I was more interested in that. So I followed Rush. So I had a good lead into my show for years, and so I became more popular. And so I spent, before I ran for office, almost 20 years, on the air. That's how I got into learning about the Blocker Bill and property tax and why things weren't moving in the Capitol. And I took busloads of listeners up to testify on different bills. And so that all happened more in 2002, 3, 4, 5. But Rush was a great guy. One station tried to steal him.
He was fun to be around.
Fun to be around and loyal. So one day another station wanted to hire him away from us. And all those contracts were 90-day contracts. If you didn't like a show, you could get rid of it. If they didn't like you, they could drop you with 90-day notice. And so Mr. Van Handel called me one day and said, Dan, I know you've been with us since the beginning, but we got this other station, bigger station, better signal, and we're gonna have to move Rush. So I called Rush over the weekend. I said, Rush, you can't do this to me. I said, I was your first guy to ever put you on a big top 10 market, and I've invested a lot in this. You can't leave. Well, they say I have this. I said, Rush, this is who you are. You got to stick with people like me. And so that Monday, Lee Van Handel called up. He said, Dan, you may think you won this battle, but you're going to lose the war. But Rush is staying with you. That's who Rush Limbaugh was. And they did that TV show, and we chartered jets and took people up there. Rush was a great human being, a great American. I mean, I just loved the guy, and I owe so much. I told him I hadn't seen him for a while, but he would occasionally, I'd hear talk about me as lieutenant governor in Texas. He said, I knew that guy down there in Texas. He's a good man. I'd always hear about it from people who were listening. And he was just a great American. He changed the Republican Party. He changed politics.
He changed politics in the United States because, he was on KGNC in Amarillo. Yep. And when he got on, I'd never heard of him. And everybody I'd talked to said, you listen to this guy, Rush Limbaugh? They thought he was informative, and he was funny, and he had a good sense of humor. He called people out on bad votes and stuff like that, but he wasn't vicious about it. He'd make fun of it or something.
No, he was so smart.
Yeah.
So smart. And I just love the guy, and we just became great friends. And although I didn't see him a lot in the last years, I saw him in San Antonio, probably the last time I saw him, and years ago. He was filling in for Michael McCall, who had to stay in Washington for a vote, and Lowry Mays had him come.
How many years did you have him with your station?
12 years.
12 years. So you built that station up pretty good.
Yeah. And in the middle of that, Lowry Mays from San Antonio, he and Red McCombs built Clear Channel Communications from one radio station, WOAI, to 2000 or whatever it was. In around the mid-'90s, he came in and bought my radio station.
Clear Channel.
So they bought our stations. I had bought, the two stations, and I worked as vice president for them for 5 years. I stayed on the air in Houston, and in 2000, I left the company. When I joined them, we were their 35th and 36th radio station or something like that, and 5 years later they had 1,500, whatever it was. And so it wasn't my culture. Lowry and the Mays family was just wonderful to me. Mark and Randall, his sons, wonderful. But they'd kind of brought in, every time they'd buy another company, management would come in. And so I didn't like the new folks. I liked Lowry and Randall and Mark. So I resigned in 2000. I was 50 at the time, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I get a call from, here we go, next chapter of Forrest Gump, Dan Patrick, from Joel Osteen, the preacher.
Yeah.
His dad had died.
Big time.
Joel had never been in seminary. He had never preached. But he edited his father's sermons for television for years. And so Joel had a TV station that his dad had bought for him in Houston, a little independent. And Joel said, look, I need someone to run the TV station. And I know someone that knows you, and said, you got radio and television experience. Can we have lunch? I had lunch with him. He hired me on the spot. Joel did. And I took over the TV station, and he began building Lakewood Church. and he went from a nervous young guy behind the pulpit to having that thing down pat in about 60 days.
I watch him Sunday night. He comes on at 10:30 on some channel, and I love to listen to him.
In fact, I helped get a vote on city council so that they would lease him the Summit. That's where the Rockets used to play.
Sure.
That's where the church is now. So, and I see Joel occasionally, but again, and so that's what I did. And then the radio station that I sold to Clear Channel, that they sold to a Spanish broadcasting company, was up for sale. And so I bought it back. So that little station in Tomball, buy low, sell high. I bought it kind of low again, and I've had the station now since 2001 or 2. We leased it for a while, then I bought it, and I haven't been on the air since I became lieutenant governor. There's just no time. But I haven't been on the air for 6 years, except to guest, and I don't even guest much. So that was, so I'm still doing that, and so all of this built to give me this background in politics and people and the grassroots and
gave you a platform.
It gave me a platform.
Your show was after Rush's show.
Yes.
That ended at 2:00.
And then I moved to 4 to 6 a little bit later.
And how often you 2:00 you'd have it 2 to 4?
I think I had 2 to 4, and then I moved 4 to 6 or 4 to 7 later.
Drive time.
Yeah, drive time. And then when I ran for the Senate in 2000, and I was mad about the property taxes, and when I ran for the Senate, everyone said, "Well, Dan can't win." I was up against
Nixon.
Joe Nixon, nice man, good guy. He carried the tort reform bill, big bill. Peggy Hambrick, who was a very nice lady.
I've forgotten about her.
And then a city councilman, all nice people. And everyone said, "Well, they got the money, they got everything, they got it wired." And Dan's just a radio guy; he can't win. We got 72% of the vote in the first round.
I mean, it wasn't even close.
I don't think that anyone's ever had that high of a win with 3 good opponents.
Yeah.
And so we got 72% of the vote and shocked everyone. No one wanted me in here in Austin, I can tell you.
Yeah, you didn't have people from Austin trying to go down there and vote for you.
Nope. And so
and they worried about you when you showed up. What's he going to do? I mean, there are a lot of them that we don't know if he understands how the process works.
So the first day, you vote on the rules, as you know, and the senators set the rules in the Senate, and so they go back in the Betty King room, they vote on the rules. Well, I had run to end the blocker bill. The blocker bill, 21 votes it took to bring a bill to the floor, just 16 to pass, but we never had more than 20 senators, so you could never pass anything unless the Democrats let you. And I just campaigned on that. So in the back room, I stood up, and John Whitmire, Dean of the Senate, said, "Okay, we can have debate here, but when the debate's over, whatever the vote is, we go out there and it's unanimous." So I stood up, the first day, and I lost 28-3. Kyle Janik and Troy Frazier, as I remember, voted with me.
You got 2.
I got 2. We go out on the floor, and 2 senators walked by me, one Republican, one Democrat, said, "Now remember what the dean said. We don't discuss the rules on the floor. We don't amend the rules on the floor. It's a unanimous vote." And I said, "Well, I can't do that. People back home are going to think I quit on the first day."
Sure.
And I said, "I got to stand. You'll never pass a bill." Okay. So I stood up on the floor, made my case, and I lost 30-1. But I never passed the bill, they said. 2 weeks later, I'm looking up at the above the podium there where David Dewhurst stood as lieutenant governor. Where's "In God We Trust"? I don't see "In God We Trust" in here. This building's been around since 1880-something. No "In God We Trust." It's over in the house. So I walked over to Kim Breimer, who was chair of administration. I said, "Kim, I want to put "In God We Trust" up here in the Senate." I said, "I'm told you're the guy I have to talk to." He said, "Yep." He said, "Well, before I'll agree to do this, I want you to go talk to a couple of Democrats. I want you to talk to our 2 Jewish members so that they're comfortable," and which I did, and they signed up. And my 2 Democrats, who could be against putting "In God We Trust" in the state Senate? And so
you passed it.
I passed it.
2 weeks.
It was 2 weeks later. And I guess it wasn't a bill. It was some authority to
it's a resolution.
Yeah. But they were all saying, "How in the heck did this guy just come in?" And none of us noticed this. And then later that year, we put "Under God" in the state pledge. And so, I went to church early in my life. My parents, my grandfather was Catholic, went to Mass every day. My father grew up in a Catholic church, but moved to the Methodist church. My mom, she was from Charlottesville, Virginia. It's where she was born. And she went to various churches in Virginia, but we went to all kind of churches. They wanted to be sure I was in Sunday school and all of those things, but I was never a born-again Christian as I knew it to be. And when I was working at the TV station one time back in 1979 or 80, when I had nothing to do between shows, went out to dinner, and I don't know how God led me to John Bisagno at First Baptist Church, famous pastor in Houston.
Great preacher.
Great preacher.
Great individual.
And I just sat down there by myself on a Wednesday night, and I thought, I've never heard anybody preach like that. He's talking to me. And so I joined the church. He asked me if he could baptize me in front of the congregation because I was on TV. I was pretty popular at the time. I said, you bet. And I got all fired up for the Lord. And then a lot of pastors will tell you people get fired up and they kind of drift away. And so
that was when?
That was 79, I guess it was, or 80. And maybe 80. And then in the 90s is when I made a full commitment to Jesus Christ. All my, whatever blessings I had been given financially, whatever, the radio station, I said, Lord, this is your station. Use it how you will. So we've never been afraid to talk about God. In fact, that's one of the reasons I left Clear Channel, because when the Mays family sold out, the new I'd never forget, the new president of the company came in to meet me, and he said, you talk about God too much on the air. You talk about Republican politics too much on the air. And that's when I knew I'm leaving. I'm not,
It's not going to work.
I don't care who you are. I'm working for God. I'm not working for you anyway. So I became a born again Christian, really committed in my 40s. I wrote a book, the second most important book you'll ever read, to read the Bible, the most important book that became a bestseller for a short time on Amazon, did very well. I made a Christian movie, The Heart of Texas, that won the awards for Best Film Made in Texas in 2009, I'm proud of. And that movie led to our prison seminary. And people can go on to heartoftexas.org. We started a prison seminary that came out of that little movie. It's a great story. I'm not going to tell it here. We don't have time. It's a great true story from a little town in Texas, and about a black man and a white man, how they come together through tragedy and the miracle of God in their lives. And so the warden at the prison in Angola saw the movie because it had gone all over the world and all over the country, and he invited me over to see their prison ministry, the only one in America where they were training prisoners serving life, not to get out of jail and be pastors, to be pastors in the prison, because Angola was notorious as the most deadly,
in Louisiana,
old slave plantation, the most deadly maximum security prison in America. And years ago, like they went warden after warden after warden, a pastor said to him, his name was Burl Cain. Burl is famous. He's like right out of Central Casting. He could have played in Cool Hand Luke. And Burl, the pastor said, Burl, you can only change the character, the culture of the prison by changing the character of your men. And the only way you can change the character is to change their heart. And the only way you can change their heart is through Jesus Christ. Why don't you let me try this? And so they started, and by then they had graduated a couple of hundred pastors serving life sentence. They went from the most dangerous maximum security prison in America to the least dangerous maximum security prison. The guards bought in. I said, wait a minute, Burl, not everyone can be, buying in. He said, well, we got a prison within the prison for the people who won't buy in. But so I get a call, and he said, we want you to go through another friend of ours I'd met who was a part of our movie, who was the main subject in the movie, a guy named Grover Norwood. And I'm on Criminal Justice with John Whitmire. And John Whitmire had been, we were knocking heads lots of times on the floor. And I called John. I said, John, he's chair of Criminal Justice. I said, look, I want to go over here. Would you go with me? John said, anything we can do that might make this prison safer for our employees and the inmates, I'll go see. So John and I went and spent the weekend in prison over there. We stayed at Angola Prison, and we saw this amazing program, Chancellor, amazing program. I mean, prisoners, they had 6 churches they had built. There was no cursing, no gangs.
And these were the same people. I mean,
these were murderers.
Yeah.
These were terrible.
Didn't matter
people.
what they weren't getting out.
They weren't getting out. And so John and I came out of that, and this is when Republicans and Democrats can work together for the common good. We came out of that, we're going to do that in Texas. So we started in either 2010 or 11, and so no public tax dollars. So we have now graduated over 100 inmates in Texas prisons. We're at the Darrington unit south of Houston. We send them out in teams of 4 to other prisons so that they can start Bible study classes. We started our first women's prison this year, or it's coming on board, because about 10% of our prisoners are women. They wanted one. We have several hundred in the program. And for our program, it has to be if you have 20 years to life left on your sentence. Again, this is not to get out of jail. This is to be a 24/7 minister, because a lot of bad things happen at 2 a.m. in a prison. A lot of depression, a lot of suicide, a lot
Sure.
of all kinds of things. And so warden after warden will tell you that it has changed the prisons where these men come. And so then you parlay all this. This is why God has just had his hand on me through this entire life, through my down times when we've all had down times, through my bad times, we've all had bad times, through the good times, through the great times. But I become lieutenant governor. So I host all the lieutenant governors in Texas here of several years ago, and I have Grover Norwood bring in to tell them about our seminary. And I get them. So now we have 6 states that are following our program. And that came out of that movie. And that movie came out of my radio station because that story that happened in Wallace, Texas, a sheriff out there, Promise Keepers did a little 10-minute story about what happened between this black man and this white man and their families. And one Saturday morning, I get up at my house out in Cinco Ranch where we were living, and there's a brown paper bag on my doorstep with this little 10-minute video in it with no note. And I watch it, and I say, man, this needs to be a movie. And so we tried to make a feature film. We ended up making a documentary, and that's the one that became the bestseller. So you can backstep. See, God has a plan for all of us.
Who financed your movie?
I put up $100,000. I got 4 other guys put up $100,000 because the story about forgiveness. And so we never got all of our money back. We got some of it back, but we'd actually
got a lot of exposure.
Oh, we got a lot of exposure, and the movie got the exposure that led to the prison, and so we're changing lives. God can take the smallest acorn. He can take the smallest seed. And if we just get out of the way and let God lead us, most people just can't give up their own identity, their own personality, their own power, their own ego. And that's what I had to do in the 90s, because I was pretty much doing it the Dan Patrick way. And sometimes it worked out, sometimes it didn't. But I believe that, we all have our own beliefs of how we see God in our lives. And I respect all faiths, all religions. People who don't believe, that's up to them. That's a faith in itself if you don't believe.
Right.
Having faith in nothing is faith in something. It's nothing. And not to diminish it, I'm just saying, I respect everybody for their position. And people come to the Lord at different times, or maybe they don't. But I think life is a maze. The Bible says God, has a plan for us, and he plans to prosper us and not harm us. I mean, of free will, people hurt us, and bad things happen to good people. But I believe life is a maze, and if you'll follow God, he'll lead you out of that maze. And if you don't, you just keep wandering around. You keep bumping into hedges. You just never get anywhere.
Bumping into doors. And so I believe that, and I'll just close with this because we've talked too long to edit. You got a week's worth of shows here. But I told this little story about 416. I was born at 416 South Oldham Street. Right.
And my mom and dad both have passed away. And I was looking at the Texas Constitution just a couple of months ago. I had looked at it before, but I never looked at the section on Texas. And where's the lieutenant governor spelled out in the Constitution of Texas? In Article 4, Section 16. 416. Now, I don't know what you think those odds are, but being born at 416 South Oldham, coming from the streets of Baltimore to be the lieutenant governor of Texas, the most, not me personally, but one of the most powerful positions in politics in the country, all I know is that journey that all of your listeners will have a similar story. All of your listeners can remember back where they started from. Where it crossed paths. Yeah. And you need family, you need friends, you need mentors, you need to make mistakes and learn from them, and you need to listen to the Word of God, because he'll straighten you out and get you on the right path. And you need to live in this country, because whether you're from Dimmitt, Texas, I did a speech for Ross Perot Jr. not long ago, and I talked about his father. There was cotton farmers in Texarkana. How do you get from Texarkana cotton farmer to where his dad and now Ross Jr. is incredible. How do I get from playing stickball in the streets of Baltimore to being lieutenant governor in the state of Texas? It's because we're a great nation. Only in America can you come from nothing to have something. only in America. It really doesn't matter. All this talk about racism in America, I discount. Of course, there are people who are racist in all walks of life in small pockets, but we as a nation are not a racist nation. We're a good nation of good people. And
they want to do what's right.
They want to do what's right. And so we have to fight for our country because it's at risk. The socialists, the leftists want to take this country away from us and our values and principles that we learned in a one-room schoolhouse or a couple $100 million schoolhouse. And so for me, every day I say, Lord, give me supernatural words, wisdom, favor, and courage to do what's right by you. And if that's not always popular, so be it. If it loses me some votes, so be it. I put life up at first. We passed the heartbeat bill, the sonogram bill. I mean, if we can't protect innocent life in the womb, what good are we?
The Constitution said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Not happiness.
Life was first.
Life was first. And the pursuit of happiness. Our founders said, we're not going to guarantee you happy. You're going to work for it. But there are a lot of people in this country that are struggling. Not everyone has good parents like I had. And we were never poor. We were just, middle class. But I
had to watch pennies.
Yeah, I mean, I had to watch our pennies, and and Spam was a 1 day a week meal, and hot dogs and beans were fine, and I was happy with all that. Although I'm not crazy about Spam anymore, I'll eat plenty of hot dogs. But we all can rise above where we came from. Some of us need a little bit more help than others. All of us need a mentor. All of us need to make a few mistakes to learn. I've sure made a lot of mine, thank God, and learn from them, hopefully. And it's not we don't need a lucky break. Maybe you need an absence of bad luck.
One of my sayings is, luck never hit a guy sitting in the shade.
Yeah,
if you're out moving around,
right.
Luck may hit you.
Right.
But if you're just sitting there, it's not going to hit you.
Right.
And let's talk just a second about, we've talked about so much in your Senate race and everything. What about when you ran for lieutenant governor?
Yeah.
I mean, there were some good people in that race.
Yes. It was another race like when I ran for the Senate. Dan can't win.
Yeah.
I mean, we had an ag commissioner, Todd Stables, great guy. Jerry Patterson, great guy. Land commissioner, David Dewhurst, good man. I wasn't even thinking about running for lieutenant governor. I don't know how many people know this story, but in 2013, I was chair of education. And I believed that we had too many STAR tests. We had 15 in those days. And Jimmy Don Aycock was chair of the House, education. We were on
he was from Killeen up in that area.
We were on the same page about things. We need to put more focus on career tech. We want everyone to go to college who wants to go, but for people who don't want to go or don't need to go, let's focus on career. And we had too many STAR tests, the 4x4. So I felt like I'd done a really good job because we changed all that in 2013. And the lieutenant governor made a comment to me. He said, Dan, I'm not going to have you back as education chair next time. I'm going to change because I'm not. He was for keeping the STAR. I'm not being critical.
That was
he had a different view.
Dewhurst.
So he had a different view, and he wanted to keep the 4x4, and so. And again, no animus to him at all. I'm just saying that. But he told me that, which is his right. I mean, I changed out committee chairman. And so I sat at my desk and I said, I'm not coming back. Once you've been a chairman, I'm not coming back. I'm not going to be a chairman because I've done a good job. And it's a big sacrifice. It's $600 a month for everybody who serves. And I've missed a lot of time from my family. And I said, I'm not going to come back and be back on the back bench again after being here 8 years. And I proved myself. And everyone thought I did a good job as chair pretty much. And then the Wendy Davis filibuster happened. And the Wendy Davis filibuster, I sat there and I thought,
tennis shoes.
Tennis shoes.
Performance. Theater.
So I looked at that and I knew, and Jerry and Todd had already announced. And I thought, you know what? I don't have to beat David. I just have to beat them. If I beat them, I get in a runoff.
Right.
And if I get in a runoff, my odds are good in a Republican primary. And David did a fine job. He treated me fine. But there'll be a day when it's time for me to move on, and I'll move on. Hopefully before the people move me on, I'll move on. And so I decided to run. And I could have stayed senator probably for a long, long time.
I don't think there's any doubt that you could have been there the rest of your life.
But I wanted to do something a little bit more, and so I ran, and again, to the shock of everybody, I finished first in the first round with 42%. No one thought that, including me. You got time for a really funny, quick story? So
I'd love it.
So we're running the race really well. We're about a week, 10 days out for the first round. So between Todd, Jerry, myself, and David, And and I come up here to Austin, and I meet with people I don't know, and everyone says, Dan, everyone says they're going to be in the runoff with you. So I everybody's polls must say I'm in the runoff. So we have a call one morning. I'm up in Fort Worth, staying at my sister and brother-in-law's house, saving money on the campaign trail. And my digital guy says, hey, he says, everything looks good. You might get 30%, you might be 33, and it looks good. We're tracking polls. We made a little mistake today. Hope it's just. And I said, what happened? They said, well, we put out a tweet that said Dan Patrick believes marriage is between a man and a man. And I said, you did what? He said, well, we meant to say woman, but I hit tweet before I caught my mistake. I said, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. It's a mistake. Everybody knows that. And so I get home that night. There's a note on the refrigerator at my brother-in-law's house. It said, watch Jimmy Kimmel. Why am I watching Jimmy Kimmel? I watch Jimmy Kimmel. And there's a picture of me with that story. And Jimmy Kimmel says, I'm paraphrasing here, if we can't beat that dumb blankety blank, then we're worthless as Democrats. And it turned out it was also on Conan O'Brien, and it was on Jimmy Fallon, and it was everywhere. And I kind of thought, man, we've come this far. And one guy made a mistake in a tweet on your staff. I didn't fire the guy or didn't yell at him. I mean, it was a mistake. And I thought, man. So we end up getting 42% of the vote.
John Connolly one time said, you're known by your enemies better than you're known by your friends.
Yes.
So that was true with you.
And so
you got 42%.
We got 42. We went
Dewhurst had how many?
28 or something like that. And so this digital guy that made that mistake, to this day, the people in the business think he did that purposely and think he was a genius. He said no one could have gotten Dan Patrick on every late night talk show and on every website except, I won't mention his name anymore, except this guy. And of course, he swears he didn't do it purposely. I hope he didn't do it purposely. And but it was funny how that all worked out. It was funny though. And then I see Jimmy Kimmel in a Cowboy game 2 years later. He's friends with Tony Romo. Tony and I run into Jimmy Kimmel, and I said, hey Jimmy, I know you wouldn't remember me. We've never met. My name's Dan Patrick, and I said, do you remember a couple of years ago you did this story about this guy and this tweet? He said, yeah. He said, that was you? I said, yes, it was. And I said, he said, you Republicans give us so much material every night. And we laughed and we took a picture together. That was the end of it. Gosh, he's really turned to the left, unfortunately.
Oh, way left.
Way left.
Way left. He's way out there. They're
telling me we have to wrap this up.
Okay, he's with the progressive. One other thing.
Yes.
As you guys, I want to get you back some other time. But in your sports announcing and everything, you got to be friends with Bum Phillips.
Bum Phillips.
And I want you to touch on that and about his funeral. And would you do that fast?
So Bum Phillips and I became great friends. The day he got fired by Bud Adams, he called me and said, come on over to the house. And I was with him that day at the house. And we just become great. I used to wear this big blue Oiler hat. We were like father and son. So Bum didn't know the Lord. And one day after the 9/11 attacks, he was raising some money for it. He said, Daniel, come over here. I said, yes, sir, Coach. He said, guess what? I found Jesus. I said, what took you so long? He said, no one ever really explained it to me. And he said, Mike Barber, my old tight end, who's a prison minister, told me how to do it. He said, Mom, when you drafted me in the NFL, he said, you grabbed me by the collar one day and said, you know what? You could be a great player, Mike, if you'd study the playbook. And he said, Coach, Bum was going to him to a prison one day, minister, and watch it. And he said, Coach, the playbook for life is the Bible. You need to learn your playbook. And that's how Bum became a Christian. And Bum then wrote a book. And I can't remember how the word, it's Coach Christian Cowboy, some combination of those words. You can find it on Amazon. You should read it. It's his story. He was a Marine Raider, which was the forerunner of the Green Beret. He was in high casualty units. He came out of the war, never told anyone about his exploits. I mean, he was a war hero. He went to work for Bear Bryant. He was the guy that invented signal callings for the defense. And then, of course, he became an NFL coach. And I was the only player that I was invited to speak at his funeral, the only non-player. All the rest were players. I was honored to do that. Bum Phillips, the greatest guy, greatest Texan I've ever been around. He had so many sayings. And he was just a great.
And they were all good ones, too.
They were all good ones. I got to wrap this up.
I understand that. Hey, thank you. The purpose of this show is to let people know about elected officials like you, about who you are. a lot of people are going to hear this, and some may not like your voting record, and they may love you as a person, that they get to know you. And I think that's so important, because we see people and we put them in pockets, and they don't deserve to be in that pocket. They deserve to be in a pocket of life, of who they are as an individual. And I'll say this, you're the most trusted person I've ever dealt with in politics, and I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. You're a great friend. You're the greatest storyteller, and you're a great Texan. Just in the mold of Bum Phillips. You guys could have sat around the bar and had a couple of beers and told stories until the cows came home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please like and subscribe to the podcast so you'll be notified when new episodes are released.